All right, well, if you've learned anything from me during this process by this point, it's probably that I sometimes make these broad statements that turn out to be just crazy. Like at one point, I think I said, anyone can do this because if you can take your Jeep apart and pay attention, then you can put it back together. Well, I'm starting to question the logic of that logic at this point. Here I am, I've got the Jeep going back together now pretty aggressively, and I seem to be having some trouble getting the rear yoke on the rear differential to line up with the yoke on the rear of the transmission transfer case. I don't know what's going on at this point. So today's task is to take some non-conventional tools, levels. I got my 4-foot level over there, tape measure. I've got a one of those tools that you shoot a laser at stuff to see if your studs are straight on your wall, or to find your studs or whatever, to put a straight line when you're hanging a picture. I'm going to set this under the Jeep on the back and kind of shine it towards the front and front to back and so forth, and get me a straight line beamed across in between the frame rails and do some measuring and see what's going on. So first order business, we're going to do our unsafe, unrecommended process for lifting the tub off. I'm going to get the engine hoist on the rear, pick that up, and lift the front end up, put my 4x4 under there, put it on my ladders again, because that worked pretty good, even though it looks silly. And then I'm going to wheel the frame out from under the tub again, so at least I can get clear from the rear diff to the transmission and the engine, all that unobstructed. And then we're going to get in there and do some measuring and some ciphering and a little bit of algebra and some trigonometry and who knows all what else, but we're going to figure out what's going on here. So come on along, let's do that. Let's find out what's going on and get it fixed. All right, so here's what I have done. I have taken off my timing gear cover so that I could get this piece of stock that I had, metal stock, right up against the crankshaft. And what I did is I brought it over here right against the outside of the frame rail, and then I measured from the outside of the frame rail to the outside of the frame rail, and I came up with the center of my piece of stock, which I've marked here. And if I look at my center of my crankshaft, I'm off by a 1/2 inch basically. So a 1/2 inch, the engine seems to be at the front, too far to the driver's side. So now, come back around here to the back. I've done essentially the same thing. I just laid this piece of stock here and carefully didn't move it and measured to the center here. There's my center. And again, I'm about a 1/2 inch from the center of the output shaft here towards the driver's side of the Jeep, of the frame. So I guess what that tells me is the engine is parallel in the frame. Okay, so I'm going to stop worrying about the engine alignment, and I'm not sure there's anything I can do about this yoke being offset a little bit. My assumption has to be at this point that that is the way it's supposed to be. So what I need to do now is I got to shinny back under there and see how well my holes line up for my bolts back up into my bushing down there, because I have those out right now. And if you'll recall from I think the last episode around, I did have to elongate those holes a little bit to get everything to line up. So I'm going to see if I can get it bolted back in place, and if I can, then we're golden in terms of alignment. I'm going to stop worrying about the alignment anyway, because I believe the engine and drivetrain at this point are parallel to the frame. And I have no reason to suspect the rear diff is not. However, I may mess around with it a little bit and make sure it appears to be, you know, a 90-degree angle from the frame, or the axle shafts, and the output shaft or the input shaft to the front is parallel to the frame, but it sure would almost have to be. And so next order of business is to work on getting this thing dropped down a little bit to get some clearance between my header tubes here and the bottom of the tub. And I think I have some square tubing that will not be strong enough to be the ultimate thing that I'm going to put there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to buy some steel stock and get me, you know, a couple layers of that, or 3 or 4 layers of that, and some longer bolts. But I want a solid steel layer in there, not a stack of washers or something. That's what that was there before, I think, was a stack of washers. And I'm not going to have that kind of a shoddy looking thing there. But at least I think what I have is, for today, I'll be able to get the floor jack up under here, take the weight on this thing, start to lower it down a little bit, get me some spacers in here, and see then how this tube winds up in relationship to my bushing or my body mount here. I think if I can get the top of the collector tube below this mounting point here, I should be okay. And then the final thing will be, we'll measure drive shaft angles just to see how they go between the two. But that shouldn't have changed, other than I took out the spacer. So if I put some spacers back in here, we'll be all original again, or how it was. So that's what I'm going to do next, is again, first check my bolt hole alignment and see if I need to mess with that some more. And then if I can get the bolts back in, I'll tighten all that up. That will keep the transfer case and transmission from moving side to side as I mess around with it. And then I'll get my floor jack under there and drop her down a little bit and give myself some clearance there. So let's see if we can make that happen now. All right, well, it's time for a quick update. So here's what I've done. I've dropped the thing down with this 3/4 inch, or I think it's about 3/4 inch drilled channel, square channel stuff. Obviously that's not going to be strong enough to hold us forever, but that will give me a pretty good indication of either that's going to be enough of a drop, or we're going to want to do some more. And that'll help me also measure the length of my bolts. I did have to kind of grind out these holes a little more. Again, just couldn't seem to get this thing to line up very well exactly with the holes in the frame. So not sure, Throttle Down Customs guys, why that is, but it is. A quick glance over there. Maybe I'll just walk you around there. Hold on. The collector is now just barely below the height of this mounting plate, which should, and I say should, theoretically give me enough room that when I'm sitting on my bushing there, will clear the thing. So I'll check that. And I had not put any oil in the rear differential yet, so what I've done is I've taken the lazy man's approach, pulled my breather tube out of that breather fitting, cut the end off of my filler on my gear lube, and I just kind of slapped some tape on there, and we're letting gravity do the work. So I've got the plug out back under here, and we'll be able to see when we get full. But for right now, I'm gonna go eat some lunch, and we're just gonna let gravity feed that gear lube into that rear diff. So just got a couple of pieces of tape holding it in place there. So yeah, this is obviously not here for good, but you can see what that is that's just drilled square tubing from the Home Depot. So at least we'll have some idea how we're looking, you know, on the drop side of this thing, if it's going to be okay or not. So I'm going to go grab some lunch, and then we'll come back and see what we can do with this thing. All right, well, I'm fed, and I thought I'd give you a quick update. So I left the first quart of gear lube kind of taped up over this fitting, letting it just kind of gravity feed down in there, and that worked out okay. And it took about 1.5 quarts to fill that thing. So I now have it filled and the plug's back in. So I can now put my tube back in there and get that all sorted out. I can now start to work on my fuel system, fuel pump and so forth, and I'll probably get these hardline brake lines put back in place. Then I really will be done under this back end of the thing. But while I got it out from under here again, I think I'll just go ahead and do all that. And then you can see what I've done for my spacer here temporarily, and I'm trying to decide if that might work if I put a piece of that lengthwise here, or if it would not. So I don't know. I would think that I probably want solid square tubing there, but first thing you gotta do is figure out if that's enough space. So that's why I'm thinking good time to kind of button up the back end here. I did take this one hose clamp kind of bracket thing off, and so I need to put one back over there on my return line, assuming I'm going to leave that return line going up that side of the engine, because it is going to return out of this injection system, I think up on that side, up over there where that plug is. So that might be all right. So yeah, while I've got her all free and open, I guess I'll work on the back here a bit more, and then figure out my spacer here, make sure I'm good when I set my tub back down, that I have enough depth. Start to work on figuring out what I need to do for my twin stick arrangement here, and keep this thing moving forward. So yeah, let's do that. All right, well, I'm gonna button her up for tonight, but I kind of decided to go ahead and give the drilled square tubing a try, just because I feel like it's completely locked in between two parallel surfaces, so it would have to crush straight down or twist to the side or something like that to fail, and I'm just not sure it can do that. So anyway, I'm gonna give that a whirl. So that's all I got done today, and I'm telling you, I spent hours because again, none of those holes lined up. So one hole lined up with a bolt. So I would drill a bigger hole, get the first in there, put it in place, reach up in there with my marker, draw where the holes needed to be. They were kind of partially got a hole in them, and so it was a lot of drilling and grinding with the little Dremel and all that kind of stuff. So a very not a lot of progress today, but I did get the transfer case dropped down an inch. So we'll see how that goes once the tub's back on.
right, well, there we have it. Our afternoon's labors. I've got my bracket built, and fuel pump is going to go right about here. And the other thing that I've been thinking since the reason I left a fair amount of this is I'm going to put a bend in here and bend this at an angle to keep junk out of there a little bit, and to kind of get maybe I might even bend it quite a bit to give ourselves some protection for the front of that fuel pump. So that's why I left all my extra excess up here. Just gonna put a bend in it. So now the job is to paint it all, and I think that worked out a lot better than my first attempt, which was this mess. So I bought a piece of 16 gauge and tried heating it up and bending it around a piece of that square tubing, and that just did not work. So if I'd had a metal bending brake or whatever they call it, I'd have been just fine, but I did not have one of those, and so that looks like crap, and we're not putting that on the Jeep. So anyway, all I got to do now is I'll probably turn all my bolts in so that the threads are up inside of here, just to give them a little protection, because I'm going to have plenty of room. And I did find some plastic rubber down in the basement that I can cut a piece of to set in here when I set the tank back in. So a little painting now, and yeah, we'll be all good to go. So I think that turned out good. So just in case you're wondering, this is just a 6 inch by 24 inch 22 gauge steel, and this was that straight stock that I had. So you saw me just heat it up and hammer it down in the vise and bend it. So that worked out all right. And then this is a piece of 1x1 aluminum that I just used as my kind of 90-degree angle joint there. So no welding was necessary. No, I did what I could with the tools that I had is basically what happened there. So I think that'll work out just fine. And again, it'll kind of protect everything. I can come around the back if I want with my hose, and this will leave me, plenty of room to kind of put the filter back at the back here, so that when I have to change out a filter, I can get to it. And obviously, because it's just bolted on there, 5 bolts, I'll be able to take the whole thing down. So I'll fab this up. Once I get it painted, I'm going to disassemble it again, paint it, and then I'll lay my pump out and so forth on here and kind of get it where I want it. So I think that'll be just fine. So there's a little craftsman work. Let's see where we're at. It's Saturday, and I think what I'll do is maybe wrap this up for now, and because the rest is just painting and stuff, and I'll come back, start up another episode when I'm ready to bolt her all back together. I'll show you how I lay out my plumbing for this thing. I am not sure. I have 2 filters. One's a 10 micron and one's a 100 micron. I'm going to have to check with the guys that I bought that from, but my expectation is the 10 micron one, the bigger one, goes first before you hit the fuel pump. The 100 micron is on our output side as it goes up to the engine, I think. And then I got the fuel pressure regulator, which I think will be mounted somewhere up near the engine, probably on the firewall or on a fender. But yeah, that's going to do it for now. I'm going to take some of the stuff apart and slap a little black paint on it, but you've seen me do that before. I won't bother you with that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time around.